green space, different items like that that can increase that. LMW, you have 25 or 35, you can get one or two. So there's a lot of little factors involved in there that can increase your score. I mean, I have.
And then, not to interrupt you, Charles, but that was one I think we added, wasn't it, last year, where we didn't
Yes.
give points for LMW, and then we added that in, so that, you know, if you were coming down, here's a new opportunity to just add points to your bottom line, you know, so we didn't take something back out or make it, so you could do all the things you were doing before, and here's a way to add a couple more points on that. But I do believe we have seen a lot more amenities on these projects, just like the last one you saw. Last month that came before, I mean, they had built in, was it the handicap type basketball courts and different type of fitness, things like that. So there were just different ways for them to put a point or two on.
You're talking
know.
about Fauch's development.
No, I'm talking about the one that was for the veterans.
The Tartan
Oh.
development.
That's right, they
Cannons
were
Crossing.
developing a basketball court for veterans.
Yeah, and that was the intent. The project is targeted toward veterans, you know. And that's where they had come in with some of these different items.
Well, if what you suggested is a path forward, I support it. I think we should distribute the criteria. I have to say, I'm not sure I'm smart enough to develop a foolproof criteria, and that's why I like to kind of fall back to the thumbs up, thumbs down, project by project approach, understanding that that's fraught with its own challenges, and arbitrariness and subjectivity is probably absolutely inherent in that kind of a process. But I think it's been very helpful to have the conversation here regarding the unintended consequences or the impact to communities of these kinds of programs. If there is an outside source expert in the vicinity that could help us gain more knowledge on those kinds of topics, that might be another suggestion, that we might have a guest speaker at perhaps our next committee meeting. Throw that out.
You know, I just want to add one more comment. It's a big issue for me. It has been for 7 years.
Get that impression.
Yeah, it's very, I mean, it's because what I work on every single day, and it's so hard to raise your median income, and it is so critical when you're talking about bringing in new businesses to meet the needs. And I just see when you build this housing in areas that already don't have things like a grocery store, you set people up that are low income to fail. They typically don't have cars. They rely on public transportation. We all know we don't have great public transportation, so now we're subsidizing a grocery store, we're subsidizing housing, we're subsidizing a bus line, when really it has always been better practice to just integrate people of lower economic means with people of greater economic means and develop mixed income neighborhoods. But we continue to not do that and move all of the poor people into one area that has no amenities or resources. So anyway, at the end of the day, this is my concern. I'm pretty proud of what I've been able to accomplish in District 3 with the help of the people that live there and a lot of community partners and charitable foundations. And some of you may or may not know, from the time I took office in '07 until now, which in the scheme of things has been a very short period of time, we have raised the median income in my district by $10,000. $10,000. I have $20,000 more to go before fair market retailers will start looking at my district without my intervention, and I can't wait till that day comes. Okay, just to let you know, because I'm looking forward to being able to giving up the business of not-for-profit development. So I can't wait till that happens. So I know how to get there within my own district. What I don't want to do is be put in a position to vote against something Commissioner McKiernan wants in his district. If you want low-income housing in your district, it has always been my rule of thumb to support the leader that was elected within that district. And I will continue to do that. If that's what you want and that's what you think is going to help your district, I'm all there for you. And the same with everybody else here. My concern has been, and thank God it hasn't happened, is to have someone come forward with the low-income housing tax credit deal in my district, and it gets moved through because it meets a criteria. that defeats, in my mind, all the work I've done in my district. It may not have an impact on yours, but it impacts mine. So maybe that's more specific for you. I'm not gonna vote against somebody that wants it in their district. I am gonna warn them about what I think it's gonna do to their greater community. So, anyway, that's my last 2 cents.
So moving forward, we're going to distribute the current scoring criteria, where each commissioner is gonna look, and Board Member Albee, are gonna look through that and see what changes or modifications they might, or additions they might suggest to that, to come up with a scoring criteria that really meets all of our, or that addresses all of our concerns and our thoughts about the housing development. And to consider as part of a revised policy that in addition to the scoring criteria, we add a committee vote to the process for that project to move forward out of this committee. Certainly, we can consider adding a vote to the process. So if we can come back with some suggestions on both of those issues, the scoring form and the procedure for our next meeting, then we can continue this discussion.
I'm going to add this. When the lawsuit occurred, because and the question or that it was perhaps arbitrary, capricious. So the strategy then was to say, okay, well then we will develop a set of criteria that once they've met those, they get our blessing and it moves on to the state. Was the strategy of developing a set of criteria the only possible strategy to meet the legal challenge? Or did we explore other strategies other than developing a set of criteria that would incorporate a vote by the commission that would still withstand legal challenge? So that's also, I think, maybe ought to be thrown into the mix.
That's a good point.
Yeah, and I know we looked at variations and we looked at other communities to determine ways where we thought success had been or they were successfully working with it, and determined that this was a good method for us and the commission was acceptable at that time. I want to say, and I think that's, Jody, something we need to look into from your perspective, and I know the attorney that worked on it for you in your office is now a judge, so you don't have her past expertise anymore, but the development of a criteria that would come before the governing body that is maybe not pointed out, but is listed out, and it's more of, do they meet this, yes or no, and then you vote that. I believe, and we'd have to look back and see where it was one where we determined was a higher probability. It did have the probability that you could have litigation on it was there. But you know, that's a risk factor you could take. As long as there's some criteria, I know we'd looked at it and say, well, that reduces it. You know, this is not our criteria, because you could, in a sense, approve one project and they could be identical to this next project that you deny. But you're still looking at those criteria and saying, based on this information, I don't support it. Or based on the information that was provided to me, I do support it. And, you know, then we could look at that and see where that's at, and then we'd just probably advise you as to what we think the probability of litigation that could be from something like that or not.
So we have our homework on this one, we have our homework on the revolving loan fund, and we have our homework on data. It's going to be a fun month. That is the last item on our agenda for tonight. Unless there is any other business, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.